Welcome back to Tour of Erozea. I'm your host Jay, and this is the show where I'm intending to go through almost all of the multiplayer duties in Final Fantasy XIV and give my thoughts about how they function in regards to what they introduce to the player, as well as just my general thoughts on how each one handles mechanics it uses throughout. This is the 4th episode of the series, so I recommend going back and checking out the ones before this to get a general idea of some terms and mechanics the game has already introduced. Otherwise, today we're talking about the Bowl of Embers, the introduction to the trials in this game. Kinda. This one is going to be different both in the sense I can't structure exactly like my last 3 episodes since there's no dungeon mechanics to this, and also because it doesn't exactly function like a normal trial. See, normally they're done with 8 people instead of just 4 like you'll see throughout this video. It's nothing major, but it does kind of change the whole vibe of the fight for me. I'll talk about it more a bit later. Anyway, that's not important. Let's get to talking about the fight itself. The Bowl of Embers fight has you face Ifrit, the primal god of the Almjala race that was summoned through praying to a high quantity of crystals. You're sent in by the Scions of the 7th Dawn with 3 of your closest friends to investigate, while the Ul'dah military, known as the Immortal Flames, accompanies you, where you are then captured and set to be offered up as a sacrifice to their flaming god. So you do the only thing you can do and decide to force the Almjala to change religions. Outside of Final Fantasy XIV though, Ifrit has had a long history with the series, starting all the way back in Final Fantasy III, where he was a creature you could summon if you made one of your party members an evoker or a summoner. He's in every Final Fantasy after this, and it's basically the first summon you either unlock or the first big threatening monster style boss you have to fight, so it usually happens early on and isn't forgotten about. Exactly like how he's used in this game. It's funny, this is actually the main reason he's the main summon partner of Clive in Final Fantasy XVI, which should be coming out in about a month if I actually get this video out when I plan to. Anyway, with all that said, let's get into what it's actually like to fight this big flaming beast. Ifrit in this fight is split into 4 separate phases, depending on how much health he has left. A common theme for pretty much every, trial going forward. The first phase of his is pretty simple. It will slash to whoever has aggro, probably a tank unless something's going seriously wrong, and occasionally use a fire breath attack that will hit whoever's in front of him, so if you're not tanking, I'd say make sure you stay behind him. But hey, you probably should have been doing this anyway to hit your position-based attacks. Once you get him down to around 3/4 of his health, he starts using Eruption, which is an AoE with a non-standard marker that targets a random player and bursts upwards out of the ground. This is interesting to have here since while it is just a standard AoE, it can catch players off guard because they may have been looking for the usual orange puddle, but at the same time, it is necessary to show this though, since sometimes some AoEs won't get marked, and you'll need to recognize what can potentially be a danger to you, though it should be a little obvious considering glowing cracks on the ground in a lava-based arena should probably warn you something's about to happen. Next up, once Ifrit hits about half health, he spawns a flaming nail in the middle of the arena. This nail is the first DPS check in the game. Basically, a DPS check is where your party has to perform a certain amount of damage on something before a time limit is up, or else you will get penalized heavily, which is usually in the form of a total party kill, because, what's more penalizing than everyone dying? Because this is again the first attempt at a fight like this in the game, it's pretty straightforward and just has you attack the nail until it dies, and then Ifrit jumps to the middle of the arena and uses Hellfire to try and kill everyone. If the nail isn't killed, everyone dies immediately, but if it is, you can just kind of sit through it and not worry. Finally, if Ifrit lives long enough to have a final phase to this fight, he just casts Eruption more, but with it having a second ring of smaller AoEs that follow him using Eruption. Though after your first attempt, if you land on this for leveling roulette, you will most likely kill him before he even has a chance to fully do anything, since everyone can just bully him to death extremely fast at higher gear levels. I think Ifrit is a pretty standard intro to these kinds of boss fights, though I do think my biggest issue with it comes from the fact that it's not structured like the other trials in the game. I can get why, since throwing new players into an 8-man fight can be intimidating right off the bat. Not to mention that for more experienced players it may be kind of annoying to queue into a level 20 trial when they're trying to get something fun for their daily trial roulettes. Not to mention that having to balance an extremely early fight around 8 people would probably be a nightmare, but at the same time I do just kind of wish it was more like the other content you have in the game, since going forward after you finish base A Realm Reborn, this kind of thing just doesn't exist anymore. So I guess to summarize, I get why this is structured the way it is, but I wish it didn't have to be. Overall, it's okay. Not something I particularly enjoyed running again, but not something I hated outright. It's kind of just there and feels a little disappointing knowing the kind of fights we get later. And with that, we finished the Bowl of Embers. Comment down below what you thought and be sure to subscribe if you want to see me make more of these. Make sure you also check out some of these other videos that should be up on the screen right now that my friends and I have been working on. I personally think they're all pretty good, but I am a little biased. Being serious though, please should go check them out. Everyone has been working super hard on them. We also stream a couple times a week over at Twitch, so be sure to check those out as well. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. I've been Jay, and I'll see you next time for another Tour of Eorzea.